My name is David, and I've spent the last 12 years as a forensic accountant. My job is to find things that people try very hard to hide: missing millions, offshore shells, and creative bookkeeping. I'm trained to spot patterns that don't fit. I never thought I'd have to apply those professional skills to my own marriage of 6 years. My wife, Emily, was the light of my life, or so I told myself. She's a pediatric nurse, the kind of person everyone describes as an angel. But even angels have shadows, and Emily's shadow came out to play during her sister's bachelorette weekend in Las Vegas. The rule for the trip was, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I hated that cliche, but I wanted her to have fun. I even paid for the high-end suite at the Caesars Palace and gave her a $2,000 fun money budget. When she came back on Monday morning, she looked exhausted but happy. She kissed me, handed me a Las Vegas coffee mug, and told me stories about overpriced cocktails and terrible karaoke. For 2 days, I believed her. But then, the pattern started to shift. Emily became obsessively protective of her Apple Watch. She wore it even in the shower. And then there was the Vegas flu. She claimed she caught a bug, but she wasn't acting sick. She was acting nervous. The first red flag wasn't a text or a smell. It was a line item on our shared cloud storage. I was cleaning up our family photo library on Wednesday evening when I noticed a hidden folder that had been synced on Sunday night from an unknown device. My forensic brain kicked into high gear. I bypassed the basic encryption. It took me less than 3 minutes, and what I found inside made the room spin. It wasn't photos of karaoke. It was a series of high-resolution videos, clearly filmed by one of the other bridesmaids, showing Emily in a dark VIP booth. She wasn't just dancing. She was draped over a man I recognized instantly. Tyler, her ex-boyfriend from college, who she had told me was just a friend, and was conveniently also in Vegas for a work trip. The video was gut-wrenching. The way she looked at him was a way she hadn't looked at me in years. It wasn't a drunken mistake. It was a deliberate, passionate betrayal. But as I kept digging into the metadata of the files, I found something even more sinister. There were voice memos. Emily and Tyler were whispering in a hotel hallway. I put on my headphones, my heart hammering against my ribs. "David is so boring, Ty." I heard her voice clear as day. "He thinks I'm at a spa right now. He's literally paying for this room. When we get back, I'm going to start moving the trust fund money. He won't even notice a few thousand a month going to charity." I sat there in the dark, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. The woman I loved was not just cheating on me. She was mocking my intelligence and planning to embezzle the inheritance I'd set aside for our future children. She thought she was playing a boring accountant. She forgot that accountants are the ones who catch the biggest criminals in the world. I didn't confront her. I didn't storm into the bedroom and wake her up. Instead, I opened a fresh spreadsheet. I titled it Project Zero. I began mapping out every cent I had ever given her, every shared asset, and every legal loophole in our prenuptial agreement. If she wanted to use my money to fund a life with her ex, I was going to make sure she didn't have a cent left to buy a cup of coffee. I spent the rest of the night installing a mirror app on her watch and tracking Tyler's social media. By 4 a.m., I discovered they had another meeting planned for Friday at a local boutique hotel. Emily told me she had an extra shift at the hospital. I looked at the sleeping angel in our bed and felt a cold surgical detachment. The David she knew was gone. The forensic accountant had taken over, and the audit of Emily's life was about to become her worst nightmare. I was going to give her exactly what she wanted, a life without me. But it would be a life of absolute crushing poverty and public shame. If Emily thought she was playing a game, she forgot that I'm the one who writes the rules of the board. In my line of work, we don't look at what people say. We look at where the money flows. Money never lies. It has a heartbeat, a trail, and a destination. That Thursday morning, while she was humming a tune in the shower, getting ready for her extra shift at the hospital, I was already deep in the guts of our financial history. I discovered that the charity she'd mentioned in the Vegas voice memo wasn't a nonprofit. It was a Shell LLC registered in Tyler's name 6 months ago. She hadn't just cheated in Vegas. She had been preparing the ground for a long-term heist. I sat at my desk, my eyes scanning the ledger of her secret transactions. She had been siphoning off roughly $2,500 every single month from our joint household account, labeling them as student loan repayment. But I had paid off her loans 3 years ago as a wedding gift. She was literally building Tyler's lifestyle with my hard-earned bonuses. The cold, analytical part of my brain, the part that catches CEOs embezzling millions, took complete control. I felt a strange sense of clarity. Every "I love you," she whispered, every late night she worked at the clinic, it was all just overhead costs in her grand scheme. Around noon, I received a notification from the mirrored app I'd installed on her Apple Watch. A message from Tyler. "Room 402, the Oakwood Boutique. I've got the champagne. Can't wait to see you in that nurse outfit, babe. I hope the boring accountant is busy counting his pennies." Emily's reply was a string of fire emojis. "He's in a meeting all day. He has no clue. I'll be there by 2 p.m. I'm bringing the papers for the trust fund transfer. Let's make this happen." My blood turned to ice. She wasn't just planning to leave, she was planning to forge my signature on the trust fund documents that afternoon. This was no longer just an affair, it was a felony. Instead of calling the police right away, I decided to play a much longer, more painful game. I am a master of asset freezing. I called my bank's fraud department, using my professional credentials to skip the line, and reported suspicious activity on all our joint accounts. I didn't close them. I put them under administrative review. This meant any attempted large transfer would trigger a manual verification process that only I could authorize. Then, I did something a little more personal. I knew Tyler was a struggling entrepreneur who had a history of bad debt. I found the contact info for his primary creditors. Using an anonymous burner email, I sent them a tip. "Tyler has just come into a significant amount of cash. Check his room 402 at the Oakwood today. He's bragging about a big payout from a private trust." I knew they'd be crawling all over him by sundown. But the real fun started when I drove to the hospital where Emily supposedly worked. I walked into the HR department, wearing my best worried husband face. I told them I was trying to reach Emily for an emergency regarding our insurance. The HR manager looked at me with genuine confusion. "David, Emily hasn't been on the schedule for Fridays in over 2 months. She requested a permanent shift change to family leave status." The realization hit like a physical blow. She hadn't been working for 60 days. She had been spending 40 hours a week with him while I was killing myself at the office to provide for us. I thanked the manager and walked back to my car, my hands perfectly steady. I drove to the Oakwood Boutique and parked in the back. I pulled out my professional-grade long-lens camera, a tool I usually use for corporate surveillance. I waited. At 1:55 p.m., Emily's white SUV pulled into the lot. She didn't look like a nurse. She was wearing a trench coat and high heels, her hair done in that specific way she knew I loved. She looked beautiful. She looked like a stranger. I watched her walk into the lobby, her gait bouncy and light. A few minutes later, I saw Tyler meet her. They kissed right there in front of the elevators, a deep, lingering kiss that confirmed every nightmare I'd had since Monday. I took a burst of 60 photos, each one a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I caught them laughing, his hand on the small of her back as they entered the elevator. I sat there for an hour, the camera heavy in my lap. I had the photos. I had the financial logs. I had the voice memos from Vegas. But I wasn't done. I wanted to see the look on her face when the boring accountant finally presented the final audit. I sent a text to her phone. Hey, honey, how's the hospital? Just wanted to tell you I love you. I'm finishing up a big case today. Can't wait for dinner. I saw the read receipt instantly. Her reply came back 30 seconds later. So busy. Emergency in the ER. I love you too. See you at 8 I stared at the screen, a dark, jagged smile touching my lips. At 8 p.m., she was going to get exactly what she deserved. I wasn't just going to divorce her, I was going to erase her. I started the car and drove to the one person who could help me finish the job, her mother. Because Emily's mother was the one who controlled the other half of that trust fund, and she was a woman who valued honor above all else. The drive to my mother-in-law's house was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. Margaret is a woman of the old school, steel-spined, deeply religious, and a firm believer that a person's word is their bond. She had always treated me like the son she never had, often telling Emily how lucky she was to have a steady, honorable man like me. Breaking her heart was the only part of this plan that gave me pause, but I knew that if I didn't show her the truth now, Emily would spin a web of lies later that would turn Margaret against me. In a forensic audit, you have to secure the witnesses before the subject can intimidate them. I sat in Margaret's pristine living room, a cup of tea cooling on the table between us. I didn't ease into it, I couldn't. I simply opened my tablet and played the audio from the Vegas hotel hallway. I watched Margaret's face go from confusion to shock, and finally to a cold, hard mask of fury. Then I showed her the bank statements, the charity transfers to Tyler's shell company, and the forged signature on the trust fund application. "She's my daughter, David," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. "But I did not raise a thief, and I certainly did not raise a woman who would treat her husband with such calculated cruelty." She looked at the photos from the Oakwood Boutique Hotel. Emily and Tyler, laughing, oblivious to the world. Margaret didn't cry. She simply stood up, went to her mahogany desk, and pulled out a heavy legal folder. "This is the primary trust deed, David. I am the sole trustee until Emily turns 35. She thought she could bypass me with your signature. She was wrong. We spent the next 2 hours coordinating. Margaret wasn't just disappointed. She felt betrayed on a spiritual level. She agreed to show up at our house at 8 p.m. for dinner. I told her I wanted the confrontation to be surgical. No screaming, just facts. While Margaret prepared herself, I went back to our house to set the final stage. I felt like a technician arming a bomb. I changed the settings on our smart home system so that all the TVs and speakers were synced. I moved Emily's emergency hospital bag, the one she kept packed for long shifts, from the closet to the front porch. At 7:45 p.m., I heard Emily's SUV pull into the driveway. I sat in the living room, the lights dimmed, a single glass of bourbon in my hand. I watched her through the security cameras. She stayed in the car for 3 minutes, checking her makeup in the visor mirror and presumably sending a good night text to Tyler. When she walked through the door, she was beaming. She looked flushed, vibrant, glowing from her afternoon at the hotel. "Hey, stranger," she chirped, dropping her keys on the console. "God, what a day. The ER was a madhouse. I'm so exhausted I could collapse." She walked over to kiss me, but I leaned back just enough for her to miss my lips. She blinked, a small frown marring her perfect forehead. "Everything okay, babe? You look intense." "I'm just finishing that big audit I told you about," I said, my voice flat. "It's a fascinating case. Total internal collapse due to a lack of integrity. You'd be surprised how much people leave behind when they think no one is watching." She laughed, a nervous, fluttering sound. "Well, you always were the best at finding the hidden details. Anyway, I'm going to jump in the shower. I feel gross from the hospital." "Wait," I said, standing up. "Margaret is coming over. She said it was urgent." Emily froze. The color drained from her cheeks in a way that was almost satisfying to watch. "My mom? Why? I told her I was working tonight. I mean, she knew I was busy." "Maybe she just missed her favorite daughter," I replied. Just then, the doorbell rang. It wasn't just Margaret. I had also invited the bridesmaid from the Vegas trip, the one who had accidentally uploaded the videos to our shared cloud. I had contacted her earlier, pretending I already knew everything, and she had crumbled instantly, desperate to stay on my good side because I managed her investment portfolio. As they walked in, Emily's angelic facade began to crack. She looked around the room, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. She saw the tablet on the coffee table. She saw the look on her mother's face, a look of pure, unadulterated shame. "David, what is this? Why is Sarah here? Why is my mother looking at me like I'm a criminal?" Emily's voice was rising, turning into that high-pitched defensive tone she used whenever she was caught in a lie. "We're not here to argue, Emily," I said, picking up the remote. "We're here for the final presentation. I've titled it, The Vegas Hangover. Take a seat. You're going to want to be sitting down for the part where we talk about the police report I've prepared for the attempted trust fund fraud." Emily's knees actually buckled. She sank into the armchair, her hands shaking so violently she had to hide them in her lap. I hit the play button on the TV. The first thing that filled the screen was the video of her and Tyler in the VIP booth, her voice echoing through the surround sound speakers. "David is so boring, Ty. He's literally paying for this room." I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't see the woman I loved. I saw a liability, and it was time to write her off. The silence in the room after the video stopped was heavier than lead. Emily sat frozen, her eyes wide, staring at the frozen frame of her laughing in Tyler's arms. Margaret, her own mother, looked away in disgust. For a forensic accountant, this is the closing meeting, the moment where the subject realizes there is no way to reconcile the books. The lies had finally exceeded the assets. "David, I can explain," Emily started, her voice a thin, desperate whisper. Vegas was just a mistake. I was drunk. I was caught up in the moment. It didn't mean anything." "Then how do you explain the last 2 months, Emily?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. I clicked the remote again. Photos of her white SUV at the Oakwood Boutique Hotel filled the screen, time-stamped and clear. "How do you explain the permanent shift change at the hospital that you never told me about? Or the $95,000 you've been trying to divert into Tyler's shell company?" The mention of the money was the final blow. Emily turned to her mother, tears finally streaming down her face. "Mom, please, he's trying to ruin me. David is controlling. He's been spying on me." Margaret stood up, her face a mask of granite. "He didn't have to spy to find the truth, Emily. You handed it to him. You tried to forge your husband's name to steal from your own family's legacy. That's not a mistake. That's a crime." Margaret took a step toward her. "I've already spoken to the family attorney. I am exercising my right as sole trustee. Your interest in the trust is being frozen indefinitely. You will not see a penny until you are 50, if ever." Emily let out a guttural scream of frustration and grief, not for the loss of our marriage, but for the loss of the lifestyle she had been plotting to steal. But I wasn't finished. "In a total audit, you ensure there are no hidden reserves." "I've already contacted the nursing board and your HR manager at the hospital," I said. "I provided them with the log showing you've been taking family leave pay while spending that time at a boutique hotel. They've opened an investigation for payroll fraud. I doubt you'll keep your license, Emily." The look on her face was one of pure, unadulterated terror. She had gone from a nurse angel with a rich husband and a trust fund to a soon-to-be unemployed felon with nothing but the clothes on her back. Just then, her phone buzzed on the table. It was a call from Tyler. I hit the speakerphone button before she could grab it. "Emily, where are you?" Tyler's voice sounded panicked, breathless. "The police are at the hotel. Some creditors showed up and started a fight A month later, the dust began to settle. Tyler was charged with multiple counts of financial fraud. Emily lost her nursing license and is currently working a minimum wage retail job while living in a studio apartment she can barely afford. She tried to sue for alimony, but when the judge saw the Vegas hangover files, the case was dismissed in less than 10 minutes. As for me, I'm back to my spreadsheets. But the house is quiet now. The angel is gone, and the books are finally balanced. I learned a valuable lesson. You can't audit a